take your seats or stand, whichever you'd like to do. Today is Tuesday, February 12th, and this is the meeting of the Village Council. And tonight we have our first meeting with American Sign Language in the back. So if I'm looking over that way, you'll know what I'm looking at, and it's really a privilege to have you here, so we thank you for that. With that said, Mr. Schofield, we have some friends here tonight. Should we have them come and do the Pledge of Allegiance?
I think we should, and I think we have Boy Scouts and Weeblo Scouts here. And do we have Cub Scouts as well? Okay.
Okay, if you kids could come on up, and you could bring your sister if you want, if she wants to. Come on up and we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance together. And then after that, you can just walk right up these stairs and come up. After that, we're going to remain standing for the invocation. And Reverend Peter Barteska from Christ Community Church is actually, you're here tonight. I'm giving him a hard time, so. And you guys are going to turn to that and lead us.
Whenever you're ready.
Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, kids, you guys want to get in front here and have your picture taken in front of the dais before we move on? It's always kind of fun because
First one gets to be married.
move right in. There are no government secrets here. You don't worry about anything you happen to touch. It's all okay. Yeah,
This way, go. There you go.
Move on over and we'll get a nice picture for everybody to take home.
Thank you. Good job, guys.
Oh, we got one more. I see Ken kind of in the back
Here we go, one more.
for our own purposes here. And one for social media. Very well, thank you.
We're Pack 208.
Pack 208.
And we're on Facebook, so if you
Okay,
wanna-
very good. So we can tag them, Ken, on Pack 208 on Facebook. And then we'll go ahead and remain standing. You guys can go ahead and go down. And then Reverend Peter Barteska, who is very kind and not mad at me for giving him a hard time.
Yes, please accept my humble apology for all that. And I just, a little quick privilege to say thank you to you and to all the staff. The village has been making our plan for building very, very easy. And so thank you for that as well.
Very good.
Let me pray for us. Almighty God, we're very grateful for the fact that we get to share life together. Thank you for the gift of that. Thank you for the wisdom that's represented not only in our council, but from the people of the community who've gathered to work out life together, to celebrate the partnership we get to share. Thank you for all of that. We do pray for wisdom tonight. We pray that it would be a time where we look to the best interests of one another and that we would celebrate that together. We love you, and we're so grateful that today, as your mercies were new, that you loved us first. We give you the glory for all of it. In your name, amen.
Amen. Thank you. Okay.
Okay, that will bring us to the approval of the agenda, and staff is recommending that we take item 7D on the consent agenda, authorization to award a contract to provide Parks and Recreation Master Plan, to the regular agenda as item 8B, and with that change, we recommend approval of the agenda.
Move to approve is amended.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed, hearing none, motion passes unanimously.
Okay, there are no presentations and proclamations, and that brings us to public comments on the consent agenda and then adoption of the consent agenda.
Do we have any public comments on the consent agenda?
We did have a request for an amendment to the minutes, which we have taken, and Ms. Newman has, and we will verify that and make that. And other than that, we don't have comments on the consent agenda.
Okay, very well.
So staff recommends approval of the consent agenda as modified.
Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much.
This is also the first opportunity for public comment for things not otherwise on the agenda, and I don't believe we have any cards for that either.
Okay, so the card you have is for an item?
Yeah, it's for
Or
item
item.
8A.
Okay, so we'll wait till we get to that. That
Okay.
brings us to public hearings.
Public hearings, and the item under public hearing is ordinance number 2019-02, amendment to Chapter 72 entitled Mortgage Real Estate Property Registration to provide an exemption to entities identified in 12 U.S.C. 4617 sub A sub 7. And Ms. Newbin will read by title.
Ordinance number 2019-02, an ordinance of Wellington, Florida's council, amending certain sections of Chapter 72 of the Code of Ordinances entitled Mortgaged Real Property Registration to provide an exemption to those entities identified in 12 U.S.C. 4617A7, providing a conflicts clause, providing a severability clause, and providing an effective date.
Ms. Cohen, could you,
Did you want me
since
to?
you initiated this, correct?
I did.
Okay.
We received a letter from the General Counsel of the Federal Housing Finance Agency, and they objected to paying the mortgage foreclosure registration fee. They contend that the reference provision 12 U.S.C. Section 4617A7 provides that they're exempt from the fee. We researched the issue. We think that it's, that a Florida court could go either way, and that the better reasoned decision is the one that does not exempt them. But we looked at the number of properties that were registering as a either Fannie or Freddie, Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac property, and there were only 17, and we felt that it was just more expedient to go ahead and include language in the ordinance that says, to the extent they're exempt, that the fee would not apply. And that's what this ordinance does. That's the only change to it. The changes are on pages 4 and 5 of the proposed ordinance.
And we discussed this yesterday at agenda review, and my concern was that we couldn't go back and redo this if we find that it's a problem in the future, but you represented that you don't believe that's a problem. If we decide at some point that this is a fight worth having,
Correct.
we could still move forward.
And if a court found that our interpretation was correct, I don't think that we would need to go back and amend the ordinance, because the language of the ordinance says to the extent they're exempt. And if a court finds they're not exempt, then it wouldn't, there would be no exemption.
So either way, this puts the argument to bed and cleans it up
Correct.
a little bit legally.
And I think they were satisfied with that.
Any questions?
We need public hearing on this?
You
Move to
do.
open public hearing.
Two.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? This is the public comment portion. If anyone has any public comment on this real property registry item, now is the time. Seeing none, is there a motion to close?
Move to close.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none. The public comment portion is closed on this. Is there a motion on this item?
And this is just first reading, so.
This is first reading, so if anyone does look at this and have a question, we'll hear it again on what date?
I believe it's been advertised for your next council meeting.
26th.
February 26th, I see it in the item, okay. So it'll be here again on the 26th, so if there are any persons interested, they can come back and make public comment before it becomes passed completely, so.
I'll move to approve ordinance number 2019-02 on first reading.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, Mr. Schofield.
That brings us to the end of public hearings and to the regular agenda. And the first item on the regular agenda is a request for council direction on, one, the location of the approved multipurpose fields at Greenbrier Park, two, the reconstruction or relocation of the competition pool pending direction, three, authorization award a task order for engineering architectural services and construction manager at risk services. Mr. Barnes and his entourage is here. He has quite the entourage tonight.
Always need backup.
Good evening. This item, as we discussed yesterday's agenda review, is actually a four-part item, generally encompassed by the exhibit you see in front of you, which is the property that houses Wellington High School, and our follow-up discussion with the high school and the school district related to the actual facilities that we would propose to co-locate at the high school. Based on our last discussion with council, we subsequently met with the school district and also the Wellington Community High School staff. And after several iterations, what we arrived at was the configuration you see before you, that it can really be broken into two different projects. The one decision point this evening is related to the athletic sports fields facilities and related support facilities that go along with those improvements. And basis for the design or the concept that we have is trying to maximize our use of the facilities, certainly since they're there to actually provide use for our programs, both in-house programs and sports provider programs, as well as being able to do that without negatively impacting, to a great extent, the school's ongoing programs, both their sports programs and use for, physical education, et cetera, as well as other activities like band and that type of thing.
Except part of this discussion is the Greenbrier Park discussion. So do we have that exhibit as part of this presentation or no?
We do not. That exhibit, we can certainly pull it if we need to. It's the same exhibit that was last presented to council that involved the 4 fields at Greenbrier and the support facilities there, which included the maintenance building, a restroom, concession, storage, and meeting space building, typical that we have at many of our parks that support the particular sport or sports that are used at those fields. And of course, the necessary and required infrastructure improvements for those, including water, sewer, paving, grading, drainage, and sports field lighting.
And the amount of difference. Yesterday, we discussed that parts of this could be done and not other parts. The pool, for instance.
That's correct.
I just don't support moving the pool yet. I don't think it's met its useful life for the investment that we've made. But that's not part of this discussion right now, the relocation of the pool, even though it's on this plan in front of us.
That's correct. Basically, there's really multiple items that we have identified in the actual agenda item. As far as funding, the only funding commitment that this council has is the funding commitment for Greenbrier Park. The actual pool, relocation, what have you, anything related to the pool isn't funded at this point. It's been a project that's been discussed both in its existing location and also at potential other locations. But the actual funding discussion this evening is specific to Greenbrier Park because there is an actual contract that we already have in place for the design of that facility that we need to make a determination on. And subsequently, we've made a selection for a construction manager for that facility that we need to determine if we're going to transfer that contract and authorize them to proceed at this site or at the existing Greenbrier site. The pool determination that's a part of this discussion is related to the larger discussion of an interlocal agreement that would be required prior to actually building any of these facilities, and there would be an interlocal agreement between the school district of Palm Beach County and the Village of Wellington. We have other interlocal agreements that are similar in nature to that. There's not any one of them that hit this project exactly as it is. This is a hybrid of any of the existing scenarios we currently have. But what we've done is in the discussion of that bigger picture interlocal agreement, we have tried to account for the ability to move forward with this pool project if we so decide in the future. We don't want to eliminate the possibility of doing that with this interlocal agreement now. So we've included that in the interlocal agreement.
So if I don't support a single part of this, I should vote no on the entire thing?
Well, I would never try and influence your vote in any way. However, the interlocal agreement is not actually up for vote this evening.
Right, we don't have that.
Right. What we're looking for is direction on Greenbrier Park. And if direction on continuing any discussion at the site related to the pool, but the two are not mutually exclusive, nor are they required to run together. The other 2 items that's on the agenda for discussion related to Greenbrier Park, and ultimately then should we decide to relocate the facilities and attempt to look at the facilities at this location would be an authorization for Kimley Horn and Associates to basically complete a conceptual analysis at this site, and also for Kaufman Lynn to be companion to that analysis, to be able to provide us pre-construction services related to value analysis and cost estimating, so that at what point, whenever we decide to move forward with actual design and construction documents prior to bidding, that we would have a good handle on the final design and also the cost estimate from a constructability standpoint.
We already did that on Greenbrier, correct?
We have not done that on Greenbrier for Kaufman Lynn.
Okay,
We have a
did
pending
it for
proposal.
the
We did it for Kimley
engineering,
Horn.
but not for Kaufman Lynn. And we can't really mix these two projects together, can we?
Which projects?
Right now, we're talking about awarding, authorization to award conceptual design phase task order to Kimley Horn. That's what we're talking about now, even though it appears we're talking about Greenbrier, but we're showing a picture of Wellington High School. I just want to make sure everyone's clear on what we're
Right.
doing here.
You've already approved the conceptual phase for Greenbrier. We've
Right.
completed that. But prior to moving into the design phase for Greenbrier, we've evaluated this alternative. And if it appears that the consensus is to move forward and get direction to move forward at the high school, then we would need to go ahead and complete that effort for the high school site.
Right,
Can I jump in for a minute?
we'd be
Please.
doing the fields
Yeah.
at the high school in lieu of doing the fields at Greenbrier. We'd be
Right.
saving the Greenbrier property for future use, whatever that might be. But
Right.
we talked about this opportunity we had with the interlocal with the school district, where we could build these fields and have use and access to these fields on the school property, which, again, we don't have that much land the village owns, so we'd be able to save that Greenbrier property for future use, whatever that may be. So that's why, you guys did a really good job going to and working with the school on what a proposed interlocal agreement would look like as far as hours of use and access and all that things. And I understand that from yesterday that the interlocal agreement would give us the ability to do all of this, but not the obligation to do this. So if we didn't want to move the pool to this site, we'd have the right to do it in the interlocal, but we could all say, no, we're not moving the pool. The pool's going to stay where it is. We just put an X through this part of the plan, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Or it could be done at a later date, or whatever the case may be.
That's correct.
Yeah, I think I had sort of intended on covering what Councilman Napoleon just addressed, which I think is important for people who are seeing this for the very first time tonight to get some historical perspective on how we got here. And so, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Barnes, but it was the will of the council to expand our recreational resources by providing additional fields, 4 in particular, which it was our goal, would be used for football, lacrosse, soccer, rugby, multiple sports.
Multi-purpose fields,
We're
correct.
currently looking for fields. We looked for areas and we centered in on Greenbrier. And so that's where the original thought came from. While we were in the planning phase of Greenbrier, this opportunity came about here at Wellington High, where basically it was offered to us, rather than use your existing land, which there's not a lot of it left, come and build these fields at our property, and it could be used for a community purpose and also by the students at Wellington High. I mean, is that basically the etiology of how we've gotten to where we are at this current moment?
In a nutshell, yes. Staff thought that we might be able to capitalize on available property and facilities at the high school. The high school was amenable to that suggestion, and we've had several meetings that have resulted in what I think is a fairly good workable plan that maintains the needs of the high school while meeting our needs as well, and at the same time allowing for Greenbrier to remain undeveloped and hopefully available for future
All right,
use,
and so
whatever that might
there's
be.
3 key points that I think we need to make clear to the public right away. One is this land will be used by Wellington for a community purpose and also for the students. And I think 2, which is really important, Mr. Barnes, is we need to tell people how we are paying for this. Can you please explain to the residents where the money is going to come from to actually build this stuff?
The budgeted funds for the Greenbrier Park, which should the council decide to move forward with relocating or those proposed facilities to the high school site, would remain the same funding source, which is the
half cent.
penny sales tax, surtax, and that was distributed among the school district, the county, and the municipalities in Palm Beach County. And we're a recipient of those tax funds, and we're accumulating funds now. I think we have approximately, Ms. Quickle will correct me if I'm wrong, approximately $10 million that we've accumulated so far toward this project, which
Needs to be spent for very specific types of things, including something
Capital.
like this.
That's correct.
Capital, it has to be spent on capital. So But even though this isn't on our property, it would still qualify for
That's
that
correct.
half-cent
That's
bending.
correct.
And here's my third key point, and then I'll turn it over. What we're able to do on this property, because there's already existing infrastructure, we can get so much more for our dollar than we would if we were starting from scratch at Greenbrier. Can you explain to the residents how it is that we're able to get more for our dollar here than we would if we were starting at Greenbrier?
Sure. Generally speaking, when you have an existing facility that's already developed with existing utilities, existing drainage, existing improvements, and coming in to modify those, being able to work within the framework of that existing property, which we really did here, because the area that we're occupying is already improved area, whether it be improved for basketball courts, tennis and racquetball, as well as there's actually green space practice areas that remain green space, but they're used for the band or used for practice of the various sports at the high school. We're able to work within the confines of those improvements and basically retrofit and bring in new facilities, but you don't have the upfront cost of a greenfield development like Greenbrier Park, where it's basically undeveloped property, where you have new infrastructure to extend and actually run drainage, water, and sewer, as well as, in some cases, depending on the finished elevation of the existing property, you might have additional fill work to do as well.
So we get more for our dollar, and we get to keep our land.
And as a result, Mr. Barnes, just to jump in, can you focus then on what that means we could do here vis-a-vis artificial turf?
Right. Backing up a little bit, one of the things we had looked at in Greenbrier, and I know it was a point of discussion in any discussion we had was, well, what do you mean when you say turf, Jim? Well, turf could be artificial or it can be natural grass. And initially with Greenbrier, we were actually going to go through a cost-benefit analysis but with a consultant that we had selected to determine, if it made sense to do any kind of synthetic turf improvements on there or if it was all going to be natural grass. Benefits, there's pros and cons on both sides of that equation, and in some cases, the synthetic turf scenario is a little bit more expensive, but has a longer lifespan, and you don't have the year-to-year major capital maintenance that you would have. You still have maintenance. Let's make sure that nobody's misunderstanding me that there's zero maintenance with synthetic. There is maintenance, but it's not the same level. However, it does have a fixed life. Where it's about 8 or 9 years, 7, 8, 9 years, whereas the turf, you've got yearly maintenance you have to do on it, major maintenance to keep it in the condition, plus the playability. In that, excessive use on natural
And
grass.
anytime you say turf, people think
Right.
AstroTurf.
I'll clarify natural or
Right,
synthetic.
okay.
So we were going to go through the evaluation, but I think the general feel was that we were going to end up with natural turf, natural grass at Greenbrier. That finally wasn't decided yet, but that was where we probably headed. With some of the savings that you have, given that this is not a greenfield development, and regardless of that, it would be irresponsible, I think, on our part, on staff's part, to recommend a turf facility at this site for multiple reasons. One, even beyond our regular heavy use for our recreation and other sports programs, combine that with the high school use on a day-to-day basis, and you would end up with a greater maintenance burden. And in some cases, actually, the current operating procedure program that the high school has in place for their game field versus their practice fields is that they really try to keep a lot of the day-to-day practices off of the game field to maintain at least some semblance of order and appearance and playability and safety on that game field. So in order to really have us be able to have the use that we need and allow the high school to have the use that it needs and be able to maintain and balance those competing demands, we are recommending and feel that cost-wise it certainly also makes sense to go with synthetic turf application on all the fields here, the 4 multi-purpose fields as well as the stadium field.
Right. And again, and that's important because I think you explained to us yesterday that then gives us weekend use
Of the additional field.
of an additional field.
Correct.
So we're getting more fields, and the amount is 11 million, 14 million? What did you say
I
last
think
night?
10
Excluding
10
the pool,
10 and change without the pool, the athletic facilities, we're in the 10 and change now.
10 and change. That includes new asphalt tennis courts, which will
Asphalt
be open
tennis
to the
courts,
public.
basketball courts, maintenance building, and
A new batting
and a
cage.
restroom, and basically the
Mr. Barnes,
Kick
would you,
wall.
if you could, clarify how we got that number, please?
yes, we have a
we're
combination of
talking
between using project data that Kaufman Lynn provided, because they're currently, as you guys know, when we selected them, as the council knows, we actually vetted them considerably even after selection and discussed projects they had ongoing. So they have a current, up-to-date, ripe database of costs for exactly these facilities: synthetic fields, natural grass fields, maintenance buildings, press boxes, concession stands, that type of thing. Using their data, they provided us with a conceptual estimate given the level of detail. As you all know, this is, a very nice and well-drafted plan, but it's still a conceptual illustrative cartoon. And I use that in the night, I'm with the best intentions. So for that level estimate, they used their database, as well as the engineers had looked at some additional costing as well. So a combination of their information, we're arriving at the 10.5 million roughly. But again, that'll be refined over time, and that's why approving those two contracts will help us get to a better number in order to jump into design at whichever facility.
So I see a problem with the site. This is impervious, all that we're adding, the AstroTurf, whereas it was natural grass, which drains. But the AstroTurf, if we're going to convert it to that, does not drain. It's a whole different animal. So I don't know where you're going to do compensating storage on this, but that's for part of this discussion.
Right.
That'll be
Basically,
the next cut and fill, will be next
Right.
kind of a look at this. So that aside, we are talking about really looking at drafting an agreement with the school board that would have at least a 30-year life for this kind of investment, and something that they're going to benefit from and the community is going to benefit from. We want a long-term contract. To me, it seems like sort of a marriage. What happens if there's a divorce along the way? What happens if state law changes and they're not allowed to give us access on the weekends on school district property? I mean, is there some way to protect ourselves down the road from those kinds of incidents?
Well, I mean, we can't project what the legislature's going to do, but, we may be able to explore different options, such as perhaps a lease where we would have certain rights. Or
Such that there could be barriers created and that kind of thing,
Correct.
separate out the pieces of property or whatever it might be, and that would be built into the agreement.
That's already part of this plan. We wouldn't want to subject the schools to no boundaries.
I'm talking about
right?
if there was some later time that we weren't allowed to share land,
Right,
there could be changes in that way that would.
okay. I'm just looking at it, what down the road could go wrong, because we're walking
and-
in.
Well, and
and
maybe,
certainly, I
maybe
mean-
we should address that point, because it's not like we're on new ground here. We've
Right.
had existing relationships. Can you explain how it's worked with other schools?
Sure. And just backing up a little bit on that same topic, let's not forget, if for some reason there's a change tomorrow, next week, next year, in 10 years, this would not be the only site that would be affected. We have an entire quadrangle of softball fields, restroom press box, maintenance storage building, a multi-purpose field, parking on school property now at Tiger Shark Cove.
And we have a lease on that?
And we have an interlocal agreement.
So it's done in an interlocal, and how, is there a time frame on that one?
There isn't. I mean, there is, but it's basically one of those things, and I be honest with you, I can't recall the exact time frame, whether it was a 20-year or 30-year time frame, but it was basically one of those that I think is probably set to expire in a few years, but it would automatically. We would look to do that in that way. Similarly, at Emerald Cove Middle School, near Equestrian Trails Elementary School and Olympia Park, you really have quite a web of property lines that commingle and intermingle there, where you have shared access points. Property lines are not blurred. There are clearly defined property lines, but if you're on the property, you couldn't tell where one property line ends and another one starts. And in particular, there's shared access there. So that would also be impacted considerably by any change like that. Clearly, in this scenario, it would be a similar situation, given that the biggest issue, regardless of separation of uses, is access, and that's one of the benefits, and I think one of the inducements to do these types of projects is the shared access.
But the point is that you wouldn't be bringing this proposal to us unless you had a track record of success both at Emerald Cove and New Horizons that we
Correct.
can work off of here.
Correct.
And so it's the staff's impression that this relationship has worked successfully, and we have no reason to believe it won't into the future.
That's correct.
Very well. One more thought about this. Again, we discussed last night, the first thing to be done would be the stadium field, for the reason, in my mind, part of it is for the benefit of the school. The school's been asking, other schools have gotten municipalities to help them out and provide those AstroTurf fields, which give them more playing time on their stadium field. So that model exists for that particular part of it, and they've really been asking for help with that for a long time because it's so difficult to maintain that grass, especially when you're trying to protect it all the time for the play. So, and we discussed that if we were to move forward, that would be the first thing to get done, which is a huge benefit for the school. But they're letting us put the facilities on their property and have access on the weekends and weeknights. So as we look forward to going into those details, I think that's where we need to make sure we're the council now. 10 years from now, a different group, the high school management, maybe a different group. So we need to protect it into the future as best as we can as we look at this document. Any other points of discussion?
I think this allows us to do everything that's in the plan, but doesn't require us to do it, so it's just the beginning, and we'll obviously go in phases, but I think it's really, it meets our needs as well as Wellington High School's needs, and it could be a really great way to maximize the land use, and I see it as a positive.
Right, I agree. I think that this maximizes fields. I think this is fiscally responsible. I think this is essentially a win-win. If we can get the document done and we can make this work, both the engineering, the contract, and then the construction, I think that if it goes as planned, that would be a win-win, and we would be, I think, remiss not to take this opportunity to at least fully and completely investigate that and make this happen if we can. I mean, I think that this is the kind of intergovernmental partnership that constituents and citizens that are taxpayers to all of those entities want to see happening. I think if we could make this happen, it's a good thing. I think we should go forward with this.
And I think we get a lot more bang for our buck at this site, because not only are we going to get 5 fields instead of 4, we're going to get the synthetic turf, which is going to have a lot more playability on it. Plus, we're going to get 8 tennis courts for our residents to use, plus basketball courts for our residents to use. So I think we get a lot more out of this project at seemingly a lower cost than we would have at Greenbrier, while we still preserve Greenbrier for future use. The only question I have is I'd like you to address for everyone who's watching or will watch later is how we're making sure that the school is staying secure while we're allowing people onto the property. Just to address, I know we've talked about that, but I'd like everyone else to hear how that's been worked out.
I think, well, certainly, and it'll be worked out further once the plan is further defined and further detailed out. One, I can tell you that no plan would be approved by the school district, particularly at the high school level. Because we're looking at really working with 2 groups. We're working with the school district staff at the main office, which is planning, real estate, legal, et cetera, and we're working with the high school, who are really the operators, the maintainers, the administrators of this site. And they would not approve of any kind of configuration that would, one, compromise facility and plant security or anything like that. So I think ultimately what's going to happen is that there will be an actual separate, in addition to all the other construction documents, there will be an actual circulation plan that's going to outline exactly any and all required separation between the uses and among the uses, and allowing for any kind of commingling of use during the same period. So while we believe that our uses will be outside of school hours, there's going to be times when there's going to be commingling, and we're going to account for that so that the school physical plant is not compromised when we're there just using the athletic facilities. So there'll be security, and whether it's fencing, whether it's additional circulation restrictions that will require people to park in certain areas and designated areas and that type of thing.
Okay, thank you.
So for those of us who've lived here a really long time and used to play tennis on those courts when it was really was a community high school that was open, where after school we could go up and play tennis on them.
And they were playable.
And they were playable.
And racquetball and all
And
of that.
racquetball and other issues. So now you said the racquetball word. So this does not include any racquetball for a reason.
That's
Could
correct.
you
At this point, we're not
describe that
proposing any
reason?
racquetball for a couple of reasons. One, I was the lone vote for racquetball. Two, in discussions with both the school staff, it does present some challenges to operating and administering the use of the campus during school times with the students, because it really hinders visibility, and it's basically a blind
It's a
spot
safety, security
for safety and security issues. So
Although there is a
you know,
wall ball facility
yeah,
here.
that,
Okay.
that could be used actually both by the school, but also by our rec programs, because soccer uses that kind of a kickball wall, and lacrosse uses it for wall ball as well. So
there's one wall, but not racquetball. But
Correct.
in the past, what would happen is we would go play, and then suddenly the gates were locked, and we were no longer
Right.
welcome there.
distant past we're talking
Very distant past. It was ancient news, but I just want to protect if this kind of an investment. I mean,
Right.
then it was just the interlocal,
Right.
where they said, we've got this and you guys want that, so let's work together. So that's where I'm looking for some kind of assurance that we're not going to have that same situation. And I know not everything can be completely sure. We're having a partner here. That's why I said it's like a marriage, because you have a partner when you get married, but dissolution is a problem. Can be a real problem. Not from my personal experience, but I've heard of it. So I want to make sure when we walk in that we're protecting ourselves as much as we can for long-term use for this kind of investment. Although I support us going forward and looking at it, with the understanding that that's what we're doing now, is looking at it and getting the real data on what it's going to cost, how the drainage issues will be addressed, things like
we're
that.
confident that these kids, the facilities, if you will, are not they're gonna prevent us from really ever having irreconcilable differences with the school district and the school. They're going to keep us together for a real long time. And to address the issue that you brought up previously, as far as like the issue with access, actually that's been the discussion point that we've had with the school staff. And it's one of those things that actually having more facilities on the site almost precludes us from having that issue, because having those types of facilities and that kind of investment and improvement on the property will actually require us to manage it. Mm-hmm. Because at this point, while they will continue to have night classes and evening use of the different school portions of the facility, the athletic facilities after a certain point, let's call it 6:15, what have you, will be under the responsibility and management of the village from a just provider operating standpoint, that type of thing. So the use and that type of thing. So, of course, ultimately, while the school district would still be overall responsible for the overall property, we would be there to manage those, which would facilitate the public coming in should we decide that those tennis courts are open play, because we don't have an asphalt court adult league program or anything like that. And similarly, the basketball courts, we actually use the basketball courts now, so should we not be using them for league practices, they would be available for open play and that type of thing.
And these facilities will be lit.
That's correct.
All of these facilities will be lit, so,
At this-
because we're using them at night.
At this point, we're proposing that they would be lighted, and we would have to look at how we could work incorporate the lighting for those tennis courts. The tennis courts over there now are lighted as well. They're adjacent to the basketball courts, but again, there's not really been any use of those courts, because based on the condition, only basketball. But we would look into that.
So we would share a portion of the electrical cost of their ongoing electric bill for that?
I think since most of the use, with the exception of the stadium field, most of the use of the other facilities are all going to be nighttime for the village. We'd have to figure that out in the interlocal agreement, and look at separate metering if necessary. That's fairly easy to accomplish depending on how the electrical distribution is on the property.
Okay. Very well.
What is the, can you put a dollar value on the land that the school district would be providing in this deal?
That'd be tough, but we could certainly try and take a stab at that.
But you can do it the other way. You can put a value on the land that is at Greenbrier
Right.
and know what we're
Right.
keeping.
Right.
You can do it either way.
Yeah.
Sure.
Sure, what Mr. McDonough said, absolutely.
So, and that's what we see as the value to us, and the fact that we work very well. You guys we have a great relationship with the school district, so we've been successful in those other projects that you've discussed, but one thing that's been a problem is people don't even know that those are our courts back there, our tennis courts over by Olympia. They don't know that those are available, and I've had to explain, you can use them, just not
Right.
during the school day. So
Right.
we'll have the same kind of discussions, but at least we'll have some more tennis courts that are not managed, like
Right.
the facility, the tennis facility that's clay and has to be watered and maintained differently, so. All right,
I'm
do we
confident
need
on
a,
you, Parks and Rec Director, will make sure that those programs and available facilities will be
Mean that
widely
guy?
marketed.
Okay.
Absolutely.
so do we need a motion on this, Laurie? Is that,
No, I think
Okay.
that you can just give them direction to move forward by consensus.
because we're not awarding anything here?
Correct.
Okay.
And actually, we'd like the two authorizations, both for Kaufman Lynn and Kimley Horn and Associates.
So
C
we
and D.
probably
Can we do
should
those
have-
in one motion?
Well, we have a
All right.
request for public
Oh,
comment.
we do, okay, so there's public comment on this, if you want to go ahead, do we need to open that, or?
No.
No, public comment is accepted. Mr. Vice Mayor, would you like to announce the
Bruce,
cards?
Bruce Tuman.
Okay,
Good evening. My name is Bruce Tuman. I reside at 752 Lake Wellington Drive in the village of Wellington. Item 2 states, quote, reconstruction or relocation of the competition pool with a public meeting tomorrow night. And that this includes this pool. It sure appears like this council have already made up your mind. As for spending $10 million on our money to improve the county school board's property, well, why can't they spend the money? Because we pay a lot of property taxes to the school board. How come they're not building these facilities? And how come they're not allowing us to use our public facilities? No, we have to spend more money. Are we paying twice for public education? Now, one of the things, the 1 penny sale tax, well, we could be using that for something else. We could even give it back to the taxpayers. The school security issue. It's a big problem, isn't it? We're going to be on their property. You don't think they're going to want more security, and that's going to cost us more money? As for the AstroTurf or the synthetic turf, please be careful. There was a cancer issue with some of these ground-up materials being used there, as well as health issue on knees, backs, elbows, things like that. And if we do this, we won't be able to use it all the time. We're going to be limited to those hours that the school isn't using it, but we're going to be paying for it. I recommend that you remove item 2 from your vote today and leave it up until after the public meeting tomorrow, and that think twice about spending twice for school board. Again, we should be using our money to improve their property. Thank you.
thank you for your comment. Any other public comment on this? We got one more, okay. Did you fill out a card, Mr. Whalen? You can do it afterwards, it's okay. You're welcome. Just make sure you get one filled out before you
We know
leave.
where he lives.
And you know where it is, so we're good. But
As
you
we
can
go
stay.
back,
Name and address. Please
my
say
name is
your-
Rich Whalen. I am here I teach at Wellington High School. I've been at Wellington and involved in Wellington since probably some of you before you were born. I don't know. 1981, I swam in that pool. That pool was built in 1981. And I was here. And I was here with the history of Wellington I could give. And in their late 80s all the way through the 90s, that school was open for recreation because Pearson wasn't done and the parks wasn't really developed. It was under the Acme Improvement District. Once everything got moving in 1996, they decided that, well, we didn't need to have that facility available to the Wellington residents anymore because we have our own stuff. So it wasn't really, but again, it was open and it was an agreement that worked very well in the early days of Wellington for Parks and Recreation. The school district will work very well for Parks and Recreation. Anything that happens will be good because it's the residents. Boca Raton, for example, has a pool, 50 meters, that was put there on their campus.
Talking
And
about Boca High School?
Boca High. And they have 5 different schools who utilize that on their campus. Plus, they do public programs. Now, my question is, we say that pool is great. I like it, but we took a lot of shortcuts in our renovation of it to save budget. Everybody was making cuts here and there from the original design that what we really wanted. We needed more pools for lessons. We needed more pools. In the summer, we're strapped for space in that pool. We're overcrowded constantly. So I'm not a proponent of closing the pool. I think we need a new pool, and we should probably put it on one of the pieces of property out there that we've talked about. Because I think we need more aquatics. And we have had a great relationship. And if it's near a school, you could teach the kids how to swim as a part of their education, which they do at Boca Raton. And they have lessons for all the different schools. You have walking distance, you have an elementary school they could do lessons for. It will enhance the community and make it safer. I appreciate everything, and I want to say that I think the school and the village have always worked together for a positive result, no matter what the project was, and I think they'll continue to. The school district would be very happy. I would be very happy with whatever happens, and the families will be very happy with whatever happens. I think anything that adds to that school and to the community at the same time is a double win. So that's what I say.
Thank you for your input.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, I'll move, if there are no more comments, that we authorize the task orders to Kimley Horn and Associates and Kaufman Lynn for this site.
Second.
And to move forward with the,
With the
With looking at the
continued negotiation of
agreements.
the interlocal agreement with the Palm Beach County School District.
Second.
And I will not vote to move the pool for the reasons that were stated. We're looking at, I agree with Mr. Tooman on this, we're looking at a recreation master plan coming up. We're looking at a lot of other things. And $2.1 million spent in 2010 was a major investment. So I don't agree with this part of it, but my understanding is I can vote for this to move forward, and that portion can be left out. If I'm voting for this reconstruction and relocation of the competition pool by voting to award, then I would be a no on this.
Well,
So,
let's be clear. I think Mr. Barnes was very clear in his presentation that that is an option for the future. We're not voting on that today. I mean, each one of us, I think, made clear that we're
And
not
that's
voting on
certainly
that
not part
today.
of my motion at all.
Yeah, and it wasn't in Councilman McGovern's motion. So as I understood Councilman McGovern's motion, it was to proceed with Kimley Horn and what was the other entity?
Kaufman Lynn.
Kaufman Land.
but if you go
And to
through
proceed with-
council direction 1, 2, 3, that's in there. So.
I see no harm in asking staff to continue discussions with the school to provide this as a potential option. That's all they're doing, so that we don't have to go back and rework this later if down the road we decide we want to do
And
it.
if we have an interlocal for 30 years, within the next 30 years, we might want to do something with the pool, if not today, in 10 or 20 years. And having it in the interlocal agreement gives us the ability in the future to do something, but by no means, I'm not voting today to move the pool anywhere.
I'm not including that in
haven't
my
even-
motion, but that,
Right, we haven't even
but I
finished
want that
having,
in the agreement
we haven't-
as
right, we haven't even
we've
finished
been
having town
discussing
meetings
for
on
2
that.
days.
So, I mean, all I'm talking about is Greenbrier, which we've already acknowledged before. We need these additional fields. We were moving forward with them at another site. So now we're just found a better location where we get more bang for our buck. So,
Okay,
in my
there's a
view, we're moving to do the
motion.
fields.
There's a motion and a second. Is any more comment? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Thanks for all that hard work. That was a lot of information. Thank you.
All right, the next item is authorization to award a contract to provide a Parks and Recreation master plan. Mr. Barnes and his entourage is here to present.
And I'll go ahead at this time ask Mr. Joe Webb from ACOM to also come up to the table. Yeah, he can.
Do you want to sit, or you can stand if you'd like?
I have the
Oh, he has a, okay.
Yep. So we'll just give a little background, basically, and turn it over to Mr. Webb for some discussion. But this is the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, which we have identified, as we discussed yesterday, as a critical element of continuing our kind of accreditation and continuing quest to stay at the cutting edge and the standards, keep the standards for the department. But more importantly, it requires us to take a step back and look at where we're at in terms of not only facilities, not only programs, not only policies, but really tying all that together while considering existing needs, future needs, as well as national, state, local trends. Mr. Delavay can just give you a quick background on how we arrived at the selection of this consultant, AECOM, and where we're at with the authorization, and then Mr. Webb can give you more detail on the study.
Thank you, Mr. Barnes. Yeah, we went through a competitive request for qualifications. AECOM was the highest ranked proposer. The selection committee recommended that we negotiate a contract, or we bring forward to authorization to negotiate a contract with AECOM. We did so a few months back. Council authorized us to go ahead and negotiate. We have spent some time negotiating and talking with AECOM. Their original proposal came in at $177,000. We were able to get a reduction of $27,227 for a final price of $149,772.48, which is what we're asking for approval tonight, with a reduction of approximately 15% from the original proposal. At this point, Joe Webb is here from AECOM and give you a brief presentation as to exactly what his firm will be doing for this $149,000.
Yes, thank you for having me, and thank you, Ed, for the introduction. Just a brief explanation on the process, and certainly open to any questions that you may have about it. I know a Parks and Recreation master plan is probably not something you do every day. Basically, our process, I'm watching the screens here, little lag. You know, our tailored approach to this project, and one of the reasons that I think is the impetus for this is, you know, the Village of Wellington has beautiful facilities. I mean, whether it's all to the credit of Eric and his short tenure, or it's, you know,
Or
the
the previous,
programs and
yeah.
things, he inherited a beautiful system of parks and open spaces, and also the programs are just clearly well run. I mean, I live right in this vicinity, and the things you run here, not only as kids and family programs, but you know, your food truck night and other things, always just impeccably done. But I think the third point being that the nature of recreation and leisure is changing. This is happening all over the country. It's happening here in South Florida, and keeping current with those trends. And there are a lot of, what would I say, big title changes happening, and keeping focused on your market for today and in the future is really important. And also, I would say it's not about just the master plan for Parks and Recreation alone, but the fourth point there of that how it best integrates in good park system plans, you know, take into account Parks and Recreation. Great ones really integrate with comprehensive plan, vision plans, other planning efforts to advance a greater vision for the overall community. And I think that's where, you know, a more holistic look will be valuable. Our objectives: recheck programs and services to ensure the top priorities of the community are being met, examine management structure and operations to ensure alignment and efficiency. Again, the nature is changing in a lot of different ways. I'm sure Eric could even add to that, but it's important to stay current. Clear roadmap for park acquisition and capital investments. You know, when you're talking about things that are buying land and building, it's very important to be looking forward. Maximize how park system can advance the village's broader goals and social, economic, and sustainability goals. And I think that is things that we could potentially add to this. Our process, try to describe it, slag is a little, try to describe it kind of in general by waving my hands around yesterday, but hopefully easier here. Just in simple terms, there's this four-step process that we put forth as our approach of the learning, exploring, envisioning, and implementing. It's really, where are we? Where do we want to be? How do we get there? And, you know, I'll go through each step here. You know, the learning part is really our deep dive, and that's something we talked about yesterday, of really getting into what are the demographic trends, what are the, you know, the things happening in the community, current programs and trends within those programs, what is happening here, and what are all the factors we need to take into account, what are existing ongoing parallel efforts. We discussed briefly yesterday, you know, bicycle and pedestrian, often integrated. Where is that plan at today? How can it be incorporated into our thinking for the future of Parks and Recreation? But upon that deep dive, and I would say we're even getting a head start, because part of that reduction that I was led to was the staff is very well attuned here and helpful. So we're really going to be able to rely more heavily on, pulling together a lot of that information, helping us to get good GIS data. Those are things we usually have to build, and we're trusting that, and I believe it to be true that they're very efficient here in providing that to us. So from that, really the exploring the needs and priorities, this is a really critical step, and what we like to do is go out to the community, this is talk to people, this is focus group meetings, interviews with all of you, focus groups with different groups. We don't really get hung up on how many of those are. A lot of times we talk about it's 8 focus groups, 2 public workshops, stakeholder interviews. We have to put a number on it, to put a dollar figure to it. I'm not hung up on whether it's 8 or 10 or 12. I just can't say 8 and have 35, so a lot of times we're very flexible. Again,
What if there needed to be 11?
I don't care. I really don't. It's really about
Not
days.
35.
And
You know the range there now.
and it has gone from 8 to 35, but then I'll probably be talking to Jim. But it's really about my time. If I have 3 or 4 days assigned to it, if you can efficiently put 12 or 15, I'm fine. It's really about can we meet with as many people as possible? And a lot of times, and I think when it's people that are passionate about their recreation or their sport, you don't want to have anyone left out. What I love to say is the people I meet with in focus groups and stakeholders are my future advocates. I would like to come to the end and really trust that we've engaged everybody. It can't be yes to everything. That's not responsible. But really having heard and engaged all the way through the process. We propose, and in our scope of work, is that at the end of this kind of learning process and exploring session, we come back in for a check-in here to say, this is what we heard, this is what we researched, this is what we found, this is what we heard from the public, get your feedback, and that through the Parks and Rec Advisory Board on, are we hearing things correctly? Did we miss anything? Is there a group out there that you're hearing from that we didn't talk to? It's kind of that midpoint check-in. I'm hoping we can get ahead in this process and really try and, one of the things from a scheduling time standpoint, we're coming up towards summer. I would really like to get all of our public involvement before we get to late June, July, August. So we're already talking about how we can make sure that we're talking to people before it gets into those midsummer months when potentially people are vacationing or gone or have other things. So kind of a timing thing. Envisioning, that is taking, okay, now we know where we are, we know where people really want to go. What is that vision for the long term? We like to vision big, look long term out, but pull back to 1-year action plans, 5-year strategic plans, 10-year, 20-year, kind of setting forth a program for acquisitions, development, other actions, and it can be short-term things. It could be policy changes or recommendations on pricing structures. Cooperative agreements is sometimes one. And then in the end, the implementation where we put this all together into a package with clear recommendations and kind of steps of how to get there. And again, come back through the Parks and Recreational Board, back to you, and meet with the community again on how it is, have we missed anything? We, really affirm this plan. Our best plans, I'd say, are those that are great partnerships. I get that feeling here because the staff is really engaged. Sometimes I'm really all alone here. Mm-hmm. And where people really get engaged, I talk sometimes, and one of the examples here is the city of Raleigh. We got to the end, and people were so excited. They were like, well, we got to fund the entire program right now. And we literally had to stand up and say, you can't do that because you'll never be able to. They wanted to fund it. We had to pull back. Building that enthusiasm, sometimes we say the process is as important as the product. Hearing people, really taking those things into account, going through the process of engagement really tends to create a sense of goodwill and creates our best plans. Our time schedule, Typically this is about a year process. I think we can condense that down, and especially with the help of city staff that I think is already starting to do stuff to get ahead on our stuff. Prefer to get that down in the 9-10 month range. I have to put a caveat there because sometimes things happen. A hurricane in May or June would hurt us. But, I'm hoping that we can get that process really moving quickly and up and going. It's a lot of times we get mired down in the first part because we're trying to get information from city, village, town that we're working with, and it can become cumbersome. That seamless transition, getting us off to a quick start will be key. But that's kind of the 10-minute version. I'm really happy to talk about any questions, or always happy to talk Parks and Rec.
Well, I've been sitting up here a few years, and the only time I've seen this place packed was equestrian issues, swimming, and baseball. Baseball is the #1 way to pack this room. So you do have passion in this community for certain things, including swimming and baseball. So, and some land use issues that come along too. But
Yeah,
I think
try
we
and avoid
definitely
those.
are going to have a lot of enthusiasm at the front. I don't think that's going to be a problem.
Fun. Yeah.
Questions?
Can we go back to the first slide for the very first page of this?
That
Second page. Tell me the part where, we'll go maybe back before this, where there's a list of all the companies that are going to be doing things.
Oh,
Tell me the relationship between all of these entities here. AECom, Ballard King, Cultural Planning
Well,
Group.
yeah, we have, we are the prime consultant, and we'll be doing the vast majority of the work. We have some of these specialty groups. The Ballard King and Associates particularly is about recreation programming. They do this nationally, so you get the benefit of looking at exactly how programs are run, exactly the staffing levels, the organization of the structure, pricing. That is not a detail that I do every single day. They have a very small role, but it's a very critical part for evaluating the current recreation programs. The Cultural Planning Group is one we have on our team. They don't have a big role right now, but they do nationwide planning for arts and culture. Currently, they're a relatively insignificant amount of the project. When we originally looked at the project, at least from my scoping it or bidding on it, I really anticipated a much bigger role for them in arts and culture. They can often be very, very helpful in places where that is a main interest. ETC Institute is, I would say, the nation's #1 statistically valid survey company. We use them. I think they've done 500 of them across the country. The beautiful part is we work with them all the time. They do these kinds of surveys to infinite detail, so we have them as a key role for a statistically valid survey. Citizen is an online survey provider. They run the website. Again, it's not a large amount of money. I think we've negotiated them out of it, and we'll probably use city staff, but that was particularly to do the online survey. And then RMPK Funding, they're local. They're here in Jupiter. Ryan Ruske, who runs that company, we often use him, and he's engaged in this project. He'll do a outline for grant stacking and recommendations for how you can leverage your money through these processes to, hopefully get more money from the outside. So each of them is a very specialty. They play minor roles, but critical roles.
About 2 years ago, we had a cultural arts study that was done. Is that usable, what we had done already? The name eludes me right now.
Right, I can't recall the name of the consultant that performed that. I think that would form the basis for their data collection, but I would not want to say that would fulfill whatever component, albeit as minor as it might be in this case. We'd still want them to determine if there's some greater analysis required.
So they might use it as a...
It would be part of their data collection, just like a lot of the other studies, as well as all the documents that we're feeding into the CAPRA accreditation process and those types of things. So that would be all part of their data collection. And they would assess how much, if any, the extent that those would feed into the actual master plan.
Right, and there's an item here that talks about potential uses for a cultural arts center, K Park, the town center, and a new aquatics complex. Obviously, we don't have many of those things, but they would use the cultural arts study, as the mayor referenced. Would they also use the work that Urban Design South Kildare has also done, for example, on the town center? That would all be given and
Right.
incorporated here?
Basically, they would, for lack of a better term, they would get an information dump. And in some cases, they
You
would.
have a lot of
you know,
information.
they would utilize their expertise together with staff's context expertise to be able to call through that and determine what they can utilize toward the master plan and what either is outdated but they would get everything and they would make that
But
determination.
the mayor's question in mind to both of you is that to the extent possible, we're not going to be.
We're not reinventing the wheel.
duplicating,
We're not
what-
reinventing the wheel.
Okay.
Right, and we try and use everything, and I think one of the nice things here is you've been building up to the CAPRA accreditation, and our program is really based on that. We're big proponents of CAPRA accreditation. I think it's a great honor here that you are an accredited agency. And so in compiling all those things, you've already started that gathering, so it isn't like I gotta find it on a dusty shelf. So we try and take everything into account to its relative value. Some things, we'll have to actively talk about whether is this really a document that we have to base on, or is this was just kind of a good idea at the time?
I'm expecting it to be background information for you,
Yeah.
like this is what they looked at a couple years ago, this is the information that they got. I don't expect it to direct your study, but we also want to make sure that he's aware.
Absolutely. That we
Right.
have the information, right?
We
And I
already
think that
have a
was my
copy.
question yesterday in agenda review, Mr. Webb, was that we do a lot of information gathering. How much are you going to use? And you had a good answer to that question, was that you are going to bring a fresh perspective. Maybe we do things a certain way, and you'll bring a new perspective to that. So I thought that was a good answer, and that it will add value. So you will use what we have, but you'll also capture new information. And also, aren't you under contract with Palm Beach County? So perhaps some of
We're trying to be.
Trying to be, okay. So maybe there could be some benefit for our.
Well, yeah, and I
and
think
for
that's been
us
an
as well.
active
For them also,
discussion that
yeah.
we're hoping for as much synthesis as possible. Now, I can't speak to it, it's been 18 months, so, we're hoping that, but, I live here, I know the parks intimately, all of Palm Beach County is a beautiful place to live, and as much as you can get that leveraging and benefiting and mutual benefit, you talked a lot today about Boca Raton. They're very good at that. Some are better than others. It's good to learn from others. I think they have a quarterly meeting of all the communities in Palm Beach County. That is a great forum to learn from one another and to form mutually beneficial things. Don't duplicate services. Don't compete with one another. So,
I don't know, we kind of like the competitions sometimes.
Well, I mean, we place a lot of emphasis on Parks and Rec in Wellington, as we talked about yesterday. And so I think one of the best things I like about your approach is this check-in point you're going to have with us and the Parks and Rec board midway through. And so we've had experiences in the past where we've gotten studies like this and the final product either wasn't as detailed as we were expecting or left out some issue that we just expected to be in there. And so this check-in point will be important for us to make sure that you're on the right track and focusing on the things that we need you to focus on. And I want to reiterate, as I emphasized yesterday, that as it relates to the stakeholder part of this, it is crucially important that staff works with you and with the presidents and directors of each one of our sports programs to make sure that every one of them is consulted with regard to their input in the study, because the last thing I would want to see happen is this study come out and there's a president of one of our youth leagues that was never consulted and suddenly says this has no merit because he didn't even ask me what I thought about this. So please don't put us in that position. Let's make sure we cover all of those stakeholders.
I've been involved in almost 100 of these. I mean, and I don't want that either. I mean, we try and go through this 4-step process with constant check-ins. I mean, progressing along, it's easy to get me to the end, and they did a bad job. Well, no, I would rather just go through carefully, methodically, making sure everybody's engaged. And it sometimes can be a little contentious, and sometimes it's a little more work, but that's better than getting to exactly what you say, to the end when someone stands up and says, you didn't even talk to me. Oh, my God. that's like killer.
Well, and that goes back to my question. I mean, reading through your proposal, I mean, it talks about things like 6 council members, a mayor, and a village manager. Obviously, that's an incorrect number. These
Well, 6
numbers
of
you're
us.
telling me that are in here are not, we're not locked into these. If there needs to be,
Yeah, no,
and you
I'm
said
not-
this to me earlier, if there needs to be more than 8 focus groups, more than 2 evening meetings, more than 10 stakeholder meetings, that you're going to make
Yeah,
it fit
I
what
mean,
has to be done here.
I'm flexible. I mean, and I think we can even work on it. You know, the evening meetings are a bigger deal because we've got to bring a bunch of staff and we have to do stuff. But meeting with just an individual, again, that was what was in the scope. So we priced that. So a couple here and there isn't a big deal to me. If I have to go, if those 8 stakeholders means 8 trips and 8 separate days, you know, that's a little hard. But as long as people are working together with us to fit things in, and somebody's out on vacation for 2 weeks, well, I can come back. It's not a big deal. It's when people randomly have me come back 10 times for 8 meetings, which has happened, that it gets hard.
No, and in some of these meetings that Mr. Dreyhouse just talked about could be done by phone. I mean, there's any number of ways this could be done.
Any number of ways. I prefer face-to-face because I literally live on Okeechobee, so it's not that big a deal. But if someone's away or they prefer to, that's fine too. We just really try and get as much information up front, hear as much as possible. Again, there's a win-win process because sometimes even with the sports groups, they're very passionate about their particular thing. And everything to everyone, well, there has to be compromise, which we try and provide that rational voice, but in an open, transparent process. Not showing up at one day at the end with, here's our recommendation. I mean, you just have to kind of listen through the process.
And that kind of leads to my question I had yesterday. When you're doing your data collection and your surveying, how do you ensure that you're also hearing from the silent majority as opposed to the vocal minority who's going to speak out the loudest about things? How do you make sure you're balancing the true interests of the village as opposed to just those people who really are hammering you on one issue? How do you make sure you engage everyone?
That's a big part of what we have to do. And this statistically valid survey, and I mean, ETC is probably at least nationally, the premier. It is a statistically valid in that it represents the sampling that we will take will represent an exact cross-section, demographically, age, for the community. So when the questions are asked, and it's very strategic, we'll talk a lot about this when we're in it, how those questions are asked in a variety of different ways to get what is most important and what are the highest unmet needs. But it's our best way to get the cross-section. We also don't try and, whereas it's important because the sports groups are, real passionate and real active, it's not just them. You have to talk to like PED people or to the older community and everyone. We try and provide cross-sectional because one of the big things we really try and pull out in our Parks and Recreation Master Plan is not just your current users, but why aren't people using your facilities now? Where are all those other people that have needs? You recreate in some way. It might be, I don't know, maybe it's shopping. It's the number 2 nationally. So dining out or whatever it is, maybe you don't have a need, but maybe it's just that the most recent one we did is 50% of the people did not know what was offered. That
So it
was
might
the
be your
number
marketing.
one barrier, what we call barrier to participation. And there's a real clear reason. In the economic downturn, one of the first things to go was publishing your monthly or quarterly booklets. You still do. Most communities got rid of them. We'll handle that online. You lost half your customers. It was amazing. Quick fix. That was the barrier to participation. Got a lot of people back into the programs. So we try really hard to get that cross-section. There is always people that, have more energy to come to meetings, have more opportunity. But 2 people working, lots of busy lives, we got to reach those people. Sometimes we do it with kids' workshops. I think you saw some of those in there. Sometimes we do it on, our evening meetings and plus Saturday mornings, trying to get the true representative of the cross-section, not just people that shout at us.
And this has never been done before. We've never done a recreation master plan.
That's correct. Basically, what we've completed are varying stages of different facility master plans, and there was a neighborhood park master plan that actually was started in 99, 2000 timeframe, but that focused on facilities again and not really any programming. We've not completed a Parks and Recreation master plan.
And will this cover any economics of the recreation?
We look at it, yes, and part of what Ballard King will look at is, you know, we talk a lot in recreation about the pyramid model of cost recovery when your broad-based community needs should be supported at a greater level because, I mean, there's a trade-off. Very individual need kind of recreation activities where you tend not to subsidize those as much in principle. So that is one of the things we try and look at, and that is a topic right now because every parks department's being, you know, under pressure to, you know, cost recover, you know, but you don't want to do that to the point that you start hurting your residents. It just isn't right. But that will be part of it, yes.
Okay, very well. Any more questions? Do we need a motion on this, Ms. Cohen? Would you?
Yeah, you can go ahead and,
Okay.
I'll
Do a
move to
motion.
authorize the award of contract for a Parks and Rec master plan to ACOM.
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, hearing none. Motion passes unanimously.
Good luck,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Webb.
Yeah,
Thank
thank you
you.
for having me.
Yes,
Look
we're going to
forward
get to know
the
you a
future.
lot better.
I'll be here.
That brings us to the end of the agenda. We have
Mr.
no
Barnes, if
public
you'd stay.
comment cards, and that will then bring us to the attorney's report.
I mentioned yesterday that the complaint to foreclose our municipal lien that arose from the Big Blue 130 violations case has been filed. I don't believe it's yet been served, but the summons was issued on Friday, so it will be served probably this week. And I didn't know whether you were interested in knowing what parcels were included in the foreclosure action, but I've provided you with copies of the various parcels. So parcel 1 would be the Big Blue property. Parcel 2, you can see in that printout that there's a piece of property within the property that's the what Palm Beach Polo was using for the soccer field. So parcel 2 would be the larger part of that. Parcel 3 would be the interior portion of that.
Was that originally a lake or something?
I don't know. I'm not sure why it has a separate PCN number, but
Well, and then the road behind there is Pondview Drive, so I'm wondering if it was at one point part of
could have been,
Okay,
could have been.
all right, so,
Parcel 4 is the north course, and even though it only shows a little piece of that, that PCN number relates to the entirety of the north course. Parcel 5 is a lake that's located inside the north course. Parcel 6 would be the office buildings when you first enter the development. Parcel 7 is a golf course. I'm not sure exactly which golf course that is, but it is one of the golf courses. Parcel 8 is the golf clubhouse, and parcel 9 is the tennis area.
And the point of this list of 9 properties walk us is what?
Well, you know, we have a very large lien.
What's the
and
amount? Do you know the
with-
amount currently?
pardon?
Do you know the current amount of the lien?
Yes, I do. With interest, the current amount is $6,716,986.88. So it's very significant.
These were fines that were accumulated on the Big Blue property.
This resulted from the 130 violations case. That was the case where the property owner went into Big Blue and clear-cut 4.5 acres of preserve area. And as you remember, this also was involved with the enforcement case, but we had a separate code violation that we called the 130 violations case, and that was upheld on appeal. There were 2 appeals of fine certifications, and that recently was decided in our favor.
And those have been appealed all the way through to the appellate court.
To the to the Circuit Court Appellate Division. The
Which
finding of violations, I believe, was appealed all the way to the fourth through a writ of cert, but
Right, so the appellate course, though, is completely over.
I believe so. I have to check when the decision came out to see if the time has run. But at any rate, even if they wanted to appeal that, we would require, some kind of a bond or something of that nature. So at any rate, that's the reason we included all of those parcels, is because when we have no way to know how much each parcel is going to bring when it's sold on the courthouse steps or sold at the judicial sale, and we wanted to include enough parcels to be able to
Cover the lane.
recover the entirety of the amount owed. And so that's why we've listed all of those parcels within this complaint. Now, I will point out that Polo West could not be a part of this because it's owned by a different entity.
Well, there's any number of things that might not have been able to be a
Of
part of
course.
this because they're owned by different entities.
Right, that's exactly right. So,
Our number actually changes daily because there's interest on it.
there's interest accruing,
So
correct.
all we would ever be able to recapture would be that, up to that amount that we're owed for the lien.
Well, the lien plus the interest.
Right.
So the lien amount is not changing because that is fixed now. They submitted a restoration plan that was approved, and
So the lien
and so
amount is certified, and that is what
the-
number?
The lien, right, the daily fine is no longer accruing, but the interest is still accruing.
Essentially on the.
And that's the 6.7 million, right?
Right,
The
that's
combined
what takes
total
it from
amount.
6.2 to 6.7.
Okay.
So, and on the day of the final judgment, I'm sure that we'll calculate whatever the interest is at that point.
And then we would recapture our lien with the sale of however many properties had to
Right.
be sold to get to that point. Can we direct the order of them, or how
Well,
does that work?
no, I don't think we can, but we've identified them as parcels 1 through 9. So it makes sense to me that the court would probably have them be sequential,
But essentially, that would be up to the court.
of course. Yeah.
Okay.
And of course, if the property owner wanted to redeem, they have an equity of redemption, and if they wanted to redeem the parcel before it went to sale, they could do that, but they would have to pay the full amount of the judgment
Very well.
if we ultimately obtain a judgment, and I can't see any reason why we wouldn't.
Good job.
Very good.
Okay. Next regular council meeting will be held here Tuesday, February 26th at 7 p.m. The village will conduct a town hall meeting on Wednesday, February 13th at 6:30 at the community center. It is on Town Center and Lakeside. And finally, village offices will be closed on Monday, February 18th in observance of the President's Day holiday. However, the village park, gym, and fields will be open for normal business hours. And that is the end of my report.
Very well. Who would like to go first? I will. Councilwoman.
I just want to say Saturday, we attended the League of Yes, the special needs baseball showcase, and I think it was their third game. And Chris Friedel, who just was recently named Hometown Hero in Wellington, is the executive director of that. And I just wanted to give them a shout out for another great event. And I think they're having another showcase event coming up in a few weeks. But it was really, really great for the kids and the parents. And also Lakeside event, we had Saturday, we had great weather, and the Green Market was kind of winding around the sidewalk area there, and it was really well attended, so great job to staff for another good Lakeside event in Green Market. And also on Tuesday, I wanted to also mention that the Scouts BSA, Boy Scouts of America, added a girls troop number 4125, right here in Wellington, and I wanted to welcome them and say we were happy to have them. Councilman McGovern and I were there and got to talk with the girls a little bit and see part of their meeting. They started the meeting together. So Scouts BSA is now including girl troops all over the country, and this is one of the first ones. So I just wanted to say welcome to them, and it's nice now that the girls want to follow in their brothers' or father's footsteps, and that the whole family can be part of BSA. So that's really all I have.
Councilman?
I have a couple of items. One was from Mr. Barnes, but I think, oh, here he is. Mr. Barnes, on Thursday, sadly, while it's a joyous day, being Valentine's Day, it's also a sad day in that it will be the 1 year memorial of the shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland. A lot of government entities are, if they do lighting, they are lighting in orange that day. Is that something we can do?
We can do that.
By Thursday, we can do that?
Yeah, we can do
Okay.
that.
Very good.
I think that would be a good thing for us to do.
Can you say why they did orange, just out of,
That's the color
Sort
they've
of.
been using since
okay.
last year when we did Ride for Our all of that is always, it's been orange
right.
all along.
I just wondered if there was a, I mean.
I didn't see any, I tried to find out why they chose orange. I didn't see the reason why they initially chose orange. Maybe someone knows,
They
but that was
use
on my
orange
list
for
too.
anti-bullying. So.
Right, so I think,
Okay, so maybe it's a school
We can get it completed.
interest. Okay, very good. Thank you.
thank you, Mr. Barnes. Also, we've heard in our last couple of meetings, things about boards and committee appointments. And it looks like we just got an AT this week or today, and then one at the end of January that talked about, we have two applicants. One would be Adrian Deutsch for the tree board, and one would be Benjamin Morris, who appears to have a significant experience in commercial agriculture lending and a variety of degrees in those fields. We have at-large appointments to both of those boards, and my point is that we have two applicants, and we've heard about those boards
What's the
not being
second board?
filled.
The construction board?
Construction Board of
Okay.
Appeals. And so, I don't know if anyone else has any ideas or people to consider, but if we don't, to the at-large spot, I think we should appoint Adrian Deutsch to the Tree Board and Benjamin Morris to the Construction Board of Adjustment and Appeals.
Very well, I think there's consensus on that.
Yes,
Yeah.
I agree.
Okay, thank you.
And then I just have two quick things. The forum tomorrow, Mr. Schofield, is at the community center,
Correct.
and it's at what time?
6:30.
Okay, so I hope that everyone will come to that. I mean, everyone has been attending input sessions for the town center concept, and this is the next in that series. This is the one where everyone has their chance to, how much time are people getting?
I don't know that we had talked about that. Typically, they get, we typically give 3 minutes, but in these types of forums, we've never limited people to just one comment.
Okay, so this will be people's chance to be heard in yet another way, so I hope people will be there with us tomorrow. And there's been a lot of discussion on social media about the survey relative to what is going to be done to make the improvements and add the multi-use youth path along Aero Club Drive. And so I really want to encourage residents both to come out to the town hall meeting tomorrow night at 6:30 and to go online and take the Aero Club survey as to what their opinion is in regards to how we should bring the multi-use pathway along Aero
Technically,
Club
it's
Drive.
a bike lane.
It's
We
a
already
bike
have a
lane.
multi-use.
They're bike
We're talking
lanes.
about widening the road to make bike lanes.
Okay, so nevertheless, to do it as part of the grant that we've received and that this council has approved, we have to make some changes in that area, and there's a variety of ways that can be done. And we have put together a survey for residents to participate. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, and I do want to apologize. That survey went out without having come to council. There was a lot of discussion in social media about it. But the surveys that went out had three options. One of the options was to leave the Washingtonians where they are. The second option was to take some of them out and do some landscaping. The third option had all of the landscaping being replaced. And as a result of some of the meetings with communities and groups, there is a fourth option from the users that is similar in some ways to option number 2, that has some of the Washingtonians remaining, some coming out, and then option 1, where they're all left in place, requires curbing, a curb and gutter, and the one the homeowners the stakeholders are recommending has some use of curbs and some places not, and that should not have gone out without your prior approval. And I think you've all gotten a copy of it now. That will not happen again.
But what I really want to encourage is, for the purposes of our discussion here tonight, is that residents go to wellingtonfl.gov/aeroclub survey and take the survey.
Yes.
We want to know what people think, and that's the way for them to tell us. So I hope that they will do that. And then lastly, I just want to again congratulate two major equestrian events happened over the weekend: the Great Charity Challenge and the Masters. And we got to be present at those and help kick them off and those kinds of things. And I want to again congratulate particularly the folks at the Great Charity Challenge. Did an amazing job, and I think those are wonderful events here in our community, and I'm glad that they were so successful this weekend. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. I'm going to start at the outside, because you always go last.
Okay, fair enough.
Councilman Napoleon, it's good to see you back.
I'm going to start off by acknowledging the good folks over at Wellington Regional Medical Center. I have learned that a minor surgery is only surgery that happens to someone else. I had what was minor surgery, and I wound up spending 9 days there. Everything's good now, but I can't say better things about the treatment I got. I mean, starting with Pam Tahana, working their way down, the nurses, the staff, the doctors, everyone there was fantastic. I don't want to go back, but you know, if you have to go somewhere, they treated you really well there. So I really want to acknowledge them and thank them for getting me back to where I needed to be. Second, Sunday was a day for autism that we co-sponsored with PBSO and FAU's Centers for Autism and Related Disabilities. It was the second time we've done it. It was a great event. It was a bigger turnout than last year, and I want to acknowledge in specific Deputy Porritt, who really pours his heart and soul into that event and did a great job getting sponsors, vendors, getting people, volunteers involved. And I want to recognize Allison Bordeaux from FAU Card, who helped register the families and get people signed up. And I want to acknowledge our staff, who again, as they always do, did a fantastic job with logistics and getting everything working. That was a great event. It's a unique event, and it's something I hope we can build on year after year, because it's really something that the families and the community really appreciate. And it's a great way to build bridges with law enforcement, and fire rescue was there as well. And it's a great day for everyone that came out. And I think everyone covered everything else on my list. So good luck, Mr. Dreyhouse, finding something to say.
And thank you also that they didn't put the sirens off this year. They did some lights, but not the sirens were a bit much for all of us.
No, I want to add, Councilman Napoleon, it's good to see you back up and healthy again. We're all worried about you, and it's good to have you back. You did leave out, though, yourself in this Day of Autism event, which was fantastic and is continuing to grow and continue to become a bigger success. And you deserve a lot of the credit, because you were instrumental in the vision and the whole implementation of it. And so Deputy Porritt did an awesome job, but you yourself also deserve credit for that, because it's a great event, and I hope we're going to continue to do that into the future.
Thank you.
I did have a conversation with Mr. Schofield to advise him that I did have plans to bring up the survey issue, because I was not aware that we were launching that,
Right.
and I had not seen it before it went
We're all
out.
surprised.
Yeah, and so I appreciate, Mr. Schofield, that you've expressed remorse, and that won't happen again. And I think it's really important that we obviously want surveys to be conducted. We want to get input from the residents as much as possible when practical, but it's also important that when we're considering things like that it comes via the directive of council, and that we have an opportunity to weigh in on the content. Because what happened was the survey went out, and then I started getting calls from people about it, and I didn't even know what they were talking about. So as much as we as a council get a lot of credit for staff's hard work and tremendous effort on innumerable things, it's not any fun to field phone calls from residents on things we didn't even know about. So going forward, I would hope that, again, if we're going to issue a survey on any issue in this town, that it comes via the directive of council, and like I said, we get a chance to comment on the content.
I
of it.
might respectfully say I have heard that, and that will not happen again.
Gotcha. Thank you. With that, that's all I have, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Just to discuss that just a second or two more, I had a lot of residents that thought it was presented in a way like that it was obvious the most beautiful, colorful one was the one we were pushing for. And I want to let the residents know that we're not pushing for anything. And if that was what they got an impression from that, that is our fault, because we shouldn't be, if we're asking their opinion, we shouldn't be trying to sway it along the way. And it leads to the feeling of people questioning our motives. Throughout the community, we have other Washingtonians that have been removed most recently. So the problem with those trees, the height is a problem for maintenance, correct, Mr. Schofield?
They are a problem for maintenance. We clean them. We clean those. We have them on Aero Club and on Greenbrier. We clean them every day. They are trimmed twice a year.
Well, the ones on Wellington Trace were taken out, just cut
Oh,
down.
no, Greenbrier and Aero Club, but yeah, some of them have been come.
There
and
were
as,
one or two that are.
as they die off, and they are dying, they're.
These didn't appear to be ill. And again, they didn't have any aerial lines above them. They were in a median. But the fronds coming down, I could see, we do have fronds coming down in wind events. And I mean, I understand, but the emotional attachment that people had to these trees is something that we should be very careful as we approach, because they really feel that it's an iconic look. To me, it looks California-ish. And I've never been to California, so, but they're very, very unique. So as we look forward, I just want to make sure that we don't let people have the impression that we're trying to steer their opinion with how we present things, because that's not our intention. We want your opinion. If we're asking you for it, give it to us, and hopefully we can make all of the pictures have the equal amount of color and things like that.
And I appreciate that. Part of the reason that not removing trees was the first option is, the trees, they look like what they look like. You added the bike lane. The problem is when you go in and you look at something else and they get color to them. And
I know,
there was no intention to do anything other than present three options.
Okay, very well. Today I had the opportunity to, first of all, I had the opportunity to visit with my granddaughter this afternoon, so I squeezed that in. But before that, I was able to present to SEU, which is a university that meets at Christ Fellowship Campus on North Lake, and it was really a lot of fun. I thought some of the kids might be here because they had an obligation to attend a public meeting before next week, so they said, "Oh, you have one tonight?" Well, they're not here, but anyways, they might be watching online, which might get them credit too. I'm not sure. I'm not their teacher, but it was really fun, and getting out in the community, talking about government. When we talk about home rule, it just struck me talking to these 20-year-olds in a room. I said, hey, who has rules at their home? Like if your friends come over, they can't put their feet on the coffee table. Or if your friends come over and it's dinner time, they're automatically invited. So it was kind of a fun way to talk about home rule with young adults. And it was kind of interesting. But they do understand home rule now, because we talked about what it means to cities. But they really grasp the feet on the table and you're invited to dinner part. So I'm going to throw that one in at the Rotary next time I talk to them about home rule, because it really kind of captured that, hey, these are the rules for us and this is how we do things here. So anyways, with that, thank you everybody for covering everything else, and happy Valentine's Day coming up Thursday. We have food trucks, right? The music festival starts, I believe it starts Thursday. What do we call that? The cover band music festival that we have. So
this is a question we make Mr. Barnes come out and answer.
So social media was suggesting that for Valentine's Day, you could bring your Valentine to food trucks.
There he is.
On Thursday and celebrate with what's the name of the music festival?
Tribute Music Festival.
The Tribute Band Music Festival. It starts Thursday,
Friday, and Saturday.
right? So if you want to do a cheap Valentine, you can come out to food trucks. And Alan, no, I'm just saying no.
Shameless
So-
plug, if you could come out on Saturday and celebrate 2 days after Valentine's Day at the Craft Beer Festival, that would be great as well.
Absolutely, that's
Andrew Morris Band playing during the festival and Foreigner Tribute Band playing in the evening.
And it wraps up with that, and that is our Wellington Classic Brew Fest 2019. Get your tickets now. I think he has them. I was told Mr. Barnes actually has them. So, And you can buy them at the community center. So that is coming up. That's Saturday, and
Mr. Barnes, tickets to that can be bought online as well.
That's correct.
If we're-
You can buy them at the community center and save the service charge. Otherwise, you can buy them on Eventbrite, and there is a service charge on Eventbrite.
and you can park at Beauty and the Beef and over at the Wellington Mall and ride over. We want to encourage everyone who participates in the Classic Brew Fest to be responsible, have a designated driver, Uber or Lyft in, and if you park at Beauty and the Beef, you can get service over here and back.
There'll be a shuttle at Beauty and the Beef, both to and from the event, and there'll be, while you're waiting, I'm sure, different services offered, beverages and food samples as well.
Okay, very well. And the other thing is, if you don't happen to bring your chair, are we gonna try to make some chairs available for people that came to the brew? The brew fests are a big deal. I really expect a lot of people to come in from outside the community and then decide to stay to see our foreigner cover band. So do we have any way to provide some kind of chairs for people that weren't prepared for that next step?
I'm sure we'll have some chairs available that we could make available temporarily at the actual tribute band event after the Brewfest for those that might not come prepared with their lawn chair. It may not be as comfortable as your lawn chair, however, it'll be seating rather than sitting on the grass. However, the grass is very comfortable.
If it's dry. So, and I'd like for us to look at ways to maybe, as we have people come in from outside the community, let them see the great hometown that we have here. So I think it's a nice thing to do if we're able, but just asking. All right, thank you. Enjoy your Valentine's, whether it's at the Food Trucks Music Festival or not. And this meeting is adjourned.